The year is 1972 and country music is dying. The radio stations are playing something that sounds more like elevator music than the raw emotional storytelling that made country music great in the first place. The artists are being forced to wear rhinestone suits and smile for cameras, while their souls are being crushed under the weight of commercial expectations. And then there is this one man, a failed songwriter from Texas with a beard down to his chest, long hair that would make your grandmother faint, a bandana wrapped around his head like some kind of spiritual warrior, and a beat-up classical guitar that has a giant hole worn through it from decades of playing. Nobody in Nashville wants anything to do with him anymore. His record label has dropped him. His house just burned down with everything he owns inside it. He is broke, he is desperate, and he is about to do something so radical that it will change the entire trajectory of American music forever. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to our channel. But here is the thing that nobody tells you about Willie Nelson. Before he saved country music, he was actually one of the guys helping to kill it. Not intentionally, of course, but he was there in Nashville writing songs for other people. Songs that would get smoothed out and polished up until they barely resembled real life anymore. He was playing the game, wearing the costume, doing what the executives told him to do, and it was destroying him from the inside out. Willie Nelson was not born to be a puppet. He was born in a tiny town in Texas during the Great Depression, raised by his grandparents because his mother left and his father disappeared. He was picking cotton in the fields when he was 6 years old, learning guitar from his grandfather who taught him that music was not just entertainment, but a way to tell the truth about your life, a way to process pain and joy and everything in between. This was not the kind of man who could stand in a studio and sing what someone else told him to sing. So when Willie Nelson left Nashville in 1972 and moved back to Texas, he was not running away from success. He was running towards something much more important. He was running toward authenticity, toward freedom, toward the truth. And what he found when he got back to Texas was a whole community of people who felt exactly the same way he did. Young people with long hair who loved country music but hated what it had become. Older folks who remembered when country music actually meant something. Musicians who were tired of being told they had to fit into a narrow box in order to be successful. And together, without really planning it, they started a revolution. The place where it all came together was a little venue in Austin, Texas, called the Armadillo World Headquarters. Now, this was not some fancy concert hall with velvet seats and crystal chandeliers. This was literally a former National Guard armory that had been converted into a music venue by a bunch of hippies. The walls were painted with psychedelic murals. There was a beer garden out back. The sound system was held together with duct tape and prayers. And it smelled like a combination of stale beer and dreams. But when Willie Nelson played there for the first time, something magical happened. The hippies who normally listened to rock and roll showed up. The old country fans who thought long hair meant you were a communist showed up. The college students showed up. The cowboys showed up. The bikers showed up. And suddenly in this one room you had all these people who were supposed to hate each other based on what they looked like. But they were all singing along to the same songs, all feeling the same emotions, all connected by the power of honest music. Willie Nelson did not save country music by making it more commercial. He saved it by making it less commercial. He took all the polish off, all the fake strings and smooth production, all the rules about what you were supposed to sing about and how you were supposed to look. And he just played music that came from a real place, music that told real stories about real people. Music that did not talk down to the audience or try to manipulate them into feeling a certain way. Music that trusted the listener to be intelligent enough to handle complex emotions and complicated truths. And the album that changed everything was called Red-Headed Stranger. Now, by all accounts, this album should have been a complete disaster from a commercial standpoint. Willie had signed with Columbia Records, and this was his chance to make a big mainstream album. The executives were expecting him to deliver something polished and radio-friendly, something they could market to the masses. Instead, Willie handed them an album that sounded like it was recorded in someone's living room. Most of the songs were just his voice and his guitar. There were no big orchestral arrangements, no background singers trying to make everything sound pretty. The whole album told one continuous story about a preacher who kills his wife and her lover and then goes on the run. It was dark, it was sparse, it was weird. The executives at Columbia Records absolutely hated it. They told Willie it was not finished. They said it needed more production, more instruments, more everything. They wanted to send it back to the studio and fix it, but Willie Nelson said no. And this is the moment that changed everything. He stood his ground. He told them that the album was exactly what he intended it to be, that the simplicity was the whole point. that the space between the notes was just as important as the notes themselves, that real emotion does not need to be dressed up in fancy production, and somehow through sheer force of will and confidence in his own artistic vision, he convinced them to release it as it was. Red-Headed Stranger came out in 1975, and it became one of the biggest albums in country music history. It sold millions of copies, it produced hit singles, it won awards, it made Willie Nelson a superstar. But more importantly, it proved something that the music industry had forgotten. It proved that audiences are not stupid, that they can appreciate art that challenges them, that they are hungry for authenticity in a world full of manufactured nonsense. And it opened the door for dozens of other artists who did not fit the Nashville mold. Suddenly you had Waylon Jennings making albums his own way. You had Chris Christopherson writing songs that were more like poetry than commercial jingles. You had Johnny Cash doing concept albums about Native Americans and prisoners. You had Merle Haggard singing about working-class struggles without sugarcoating anything. This whole movement became known as outlaw country, and Willie Nelson was the guy who proved it could work commercially. He was the one who showed that you did not have to choose between artistic integrity and commercial success, that you could have both if you were brave enough to stay true to yourself. But here is what makes Willie Nelson truly special, and what people do not talk about enough. He did not do this for his own glory. He did not hoard the spotlight or try to keep other artists down so he could stay on top. Instead, he used his success to lift up everyone around him. He started doing these concerts called 4th of July picnics, where he would invite dozens of different artists to perform. Established stars and complete unknowns all on the same stage, all treated with the same respect. He collaborated with everyone. Country artists and rock artists and jazz musicians and blues singers. He did not care about genres or categories or what was cool. He just cared about good music and good people. And when the farm crisis hit America in the 1980s, and family farms were being foreclosed on at an alarming rate, Willie Nelson started Farm Aid, a massive benefit concert that raised millions of dollars for struggling farmers. He did not have to do that. He was a rich and famous musician by that point. He could have just stayed in his bubble and ignored the suffering of regular people. But that was never who Willie Nelson was. He remembered picking cotton as a kid. He remembered what it was like to be broke and desperate. And he used his platform to help people who were going through the same struggles he had faced. There is this quote from Willie Nelson that sums up his whole philosophy. He said that once you replace negative thoughts with positive ones, you will start having positive results. Now that might sound like simple self-help advice, but it is actually much deeper than that. What Willie understood is that the music industry and really the whole world runs on fear. Fear that you are not good enough. Fear that people will not like you if you show them who you really are. Fear that if you do not follow the rules, you will fail. And that fear makes people do things that go against their own nature. It makes them compromise and sell out and betray themselves. Willie Nelson decided to reject that fear, to trust that if he made music that was true to himself, there would be an audience for it. And he was right. Think about how radical that was in the context of the 1970s. This was a time when everything was becoming more corporate and manufactured, when focus groups were determining what songs would be released, when image consultants were telling artists how to dress and talk and act, when the whole music industry was becoming an assembly line designed to produce the maximum amount of profit with the minimum amount of risk. And into that environment walks Willie Nelson with his long braids and his beat-up guitar and his songs about heartbreak and redemption and the human condition. And instead of being crushed by the machine, he somehow managed to change the machine itself. The impact of what Willie Nelson did extends far beyond country music. You can draw a direct line from what he accomplished to every independent artist who has ever decided to release music on their own terms. Every musician who has ever crowdfunded an album or built an audience through grassroots touring instead of waiting for a record label to give them permission. Every artist who has ever valued creative freedom over commercial success. They are all walking a path that Willie Nelson helped to clear. And the beautiful thing is that Willie Nelson is still doing it. The man is in his 90s now and he is still touring, still making albums, still refusing to be put in a box or told what he can and cannot do. He has released over 200 albums in his career. Think about that number for a second. 200 albums. Most artists consider themselves lucky if they can release 10 albums in their entire lifetime. Willie Nelson has released 20 times that many, and he is not just cranking out the same thing over and over again. He is constantly experimenting, covering songs from different genres, working with different producers, trying new things, staying curious and open and alive. There is a lesson in that for all of us. whether we are musicians or not. The lesson is that authenticity is not just the right way to live, it is also the most effective way to live. When you are true to yourself, you have access to a source of energy and creativity that no amount of commercial calculation can match. When you stop trying to be what you think other people want you to be and start being who you actually are, you become magnetic. People are drawn to that realness because it is so rare in a world full of fake performances. Willie Nelson understood this instinctively. He understood that the audience can always tell when you are being real and when you are putting on an act. They might not be able to articulate exactly what they are sensing, but they feel it, and they respond to authenticity with a loyalty that manufactured pop stars can never achieve. This is why Willie Nelson has fans who have been following him for 50 years. This is why his concerts feel more like family reunions than entertainment events. This is why people get his face tattooed on their bodies and name their children after him, because he gave them something real in a fake world. The day Willie Nelson saved country music was not really one specific day. It was a series of decisions he made over the course of several years. The decision to leave Nashville, the decision to grow his hair long and stop trying to look like a conventional country star, the decision to trust his own artistic instincts even when the experts told him he was wrong, the decision to release Red-Headed Stranger exactly as he wanted it, the decision to keep being himself no matter how successful he became. Each of these decisions was a small act of rebellion, and together they added up to a revolution, but nobody talks about it in these terms. When people discuss Willie Nelson, they usually focus on his greatest hits, or his activism, or his legendary marijuana consumption, and all of that is part of the story. But the deeper story is about what happens when one person decides to stop playing by rules that do not serve them, about what becomes possible when you value truth over comfort, about how individual courage can change entire industries and inspire millions of people. The music industry today is going through another crisis. Streaming services pay artists almost nothing. Social media algorithms determine who gets heard and who does not. There is pressure to constantly create content and stay relevant and play the game. Young artists are burning out at alarming rates because they are trying to be everything to everyone. And in the middle of all this chaos, the story of Willie Nelson feels more relevant than ever, because it reminds us that there is another way, that you do not have to let the machine define you, that the most powerful thing you can do is be yourself, so completely and unapologetically that you create your own category. Willie Nelson did not save country music by being the best guitar player, or the best singer, or the best looking guy in the room. He saved it by being the most himself, by refusing to compromise on the things that mattered to him, by trusting that there were other people out there who were hungry for the same authenticity he was offering. And he was right. There were millions of them. There still are. So the next time you hear a Willie Nelson song playing somewhere, do not just hear it as background music. Listen to what it represents. Listen to the choice that was made to value art over commerce. Listen to the courage it took to walk away from the established path and create a new one. Listen to the voice of a man who decided that being true to himself was more important than being successful by someone else's definition. And then ask yourself what choices you are making in your own life. Where are you compromising yourself to fit in, or please others, or follow rules that do not make sense? Where could you be more like Willie, more authentic, more brave, more yourself? Because that is ultimately what Willie Nelson gave us. Not just great music, but a blueprint for how to live. A reminder that the things that make you different are not weaknesses to be hidden, but strengths to be celebrated. That the world does not need more people trying to be like everyone else. It needs more people willing to be exactly who they are. And if a kid who grew up picking cotton in Texas during the Depression can grow up to change the entire music industry by just being himself, then what is possible for the rest of us? This is the day Willie Nelson saved country music. Not by rescuing it from commercial failure, but by rescuing it from spiritual death. By reminding everyone what it was supposed to be in the first place. A vehicle for truth-telling. A way for regular people to share their stories and struggles and dreams. A connection between human beings that transcends all the artificial categories we use to divide ourselves. And that is why decades later, his music still sounds fresh and vital, while so much of what was popular in the 1970s sounds dated and lifeless. Because truth never goes out of style, authenticity never becomes irrelevant, and courage never stops being inspiring. Willie Nelson saved country music, and in doing so, he showed all of us what is possible when we stop trying to be what we think we should be, and start being who we actually are. That is a gift that extends far beyond music. That is a gift that can change your whole life if you let it. And that is why, even though nobody talks about it in quite these terms, the day Willie Nelson saved country music might actually be the day he saved a lot more than that. He might have saved the idea that art can still matter, that individuals can still make a difference, that you can still win by being yourself. And in a world that seems designed to make us all the same, that might be the most important message of all.